did read your story ahead of time because I really like that idea around a conversation. And one of the sentences caught my eye, and it reminded me of the story of you guys getting rocks thrown at you when you were in a car, because of that assumption that if you're not Arabic, you are a target in a way, both way, like, and you mentioning, and not at all to put blame on the kids. We lack sidewalks here too in places that need sidewalks, but oh, that spiral of distrust. And so because in the story you were saying people drive unbelievably recklessly along these roads, which is a parallel in our society too, like holy crap. But yeah, and I think that having the children in school resonates a lot. But yeah, and people thinking that they have to keep themselves safe at the risk of somebody else. And no, and like I said, it's what's interesting is the parallels here, because the reserves are like a racetrack sometimes, no lighting, no, and it's like we're quite close. So with the thing is, I don't think people race through there because they're feeling afraid, but it's
40 years, more than 40 years ago now, I guess 50 or 60 years ago, it might have been because they were afraid. I don't know what it was like on the island, but certainly northern Manitoba, it might have been. Just because you didn't know the community, you didn't know the people, it was alien territory to you, and the only stories you knew about Indians weren't good ones. They weren't welcome in your town, and you didn't feel very welcome in theirs. So it might have been different then. But certainly now, it's just, people trying to get from point A to point B through these, on this crappy road, through these lousily, very poorly looked after houses with garbage in front of them.
So up north, what changed there that made people not see it as like enemy territory that you?
I don't know. There's probably still isn't a lot of travel through reserved because most of them would be off the main roads, but there are more people coming off reserve into community. So Flim Flam, when I visited there in 2009, was way different. I mean, first, it wasn't very well off. They'd lost a lot of jobs at the mine and the mill there, but there were way more Cree in that town than there ever used to be because I think they got a Walmart and a Canadian Tire. And so it became a shopping center for everybody in the Saskatchewan and Manitoba reserves around there. They're all in and they're shopping and they're part of the economic support for that whole community now. It's way different when I was a kid because they had, what did we have? We had like 4,000 or 5,000 people working in the mine and the smelter. Well, maybe not that many. No, maybe 3,000. But anyway, really good jobs. Didn't need them. Didn't serve them. Not much anyway. If they came in for bulk supplies once a year, but now it's quite different. So I think that's what's changed it. People start to see each other more commonly, more daily. They experience one another as humans. They bump into each other at Canadian Tire. So
yeah. Well, I see it in Superstore here. As, as a positive, very positive thing. I was, I always was regretful that the Walmart and those other stores got built out of town where you can't just walk to because it's another segregation that happens. I'd like to think unintentionally. But that both seeing each other as someone that you need, that part of a web of.
So here that's happening. I think that's good. Because it's sort of we've overtaken, right? The colonizers won, basically. We took it all, and we left them very little. And now we're struggling with the legal niceties. I was just talking about this with my neighbors the other day, because they're all pissed about Trudeau's gun stuff. Don't mind that he did it, because nobody actually needs an assault rifle, I suppose. Although, you know, it's your right to have whatever you want to have. But okay, but we didn't get to vote on it. It wasn't done openly and in public. And the Indians get to keep their guns. What the hell is that? Jesus, I said, I don't know what that is. I haven't researched it. But maybe part of it is this is still their country. And we have to negotiate with them. We can't actually pass laws that affect them directly. In some places, in some cases, without negotiations. We actually have to talk to them. Well, what the hell do we got to do that for? We're already paying them everything they need, and they're living the life of luxury. Well, oh my God, I said, that's not happening. And I said, and why do we, you know, why would we have to negotiate? I said, well, don't ask me, ask the courts. I said, we told a story about ourselves. I said, see, the American story was, we won this land and we took it from the Indian in open warfare and we wiped those buggers out. There's none of them left. We won. We took their stuff. We fought from the wagon trains, and that's who we are. And in Canada, we said, no, that's not us. We're the nice people. We came in, we had a conversation, we traded, we made agreements, we had treaties, we did things civilized. We're much better than the Americans. Let's not talk about the smallpox. But we were actually really good. And so that's our story. I said, so our story is we're based in law. And in BC, we didn't negotiate treaties. There's, you know, very few treaties here. Most of the land in BC has never been ceded by its First Nations original holders, and our courts have said they have rights and title in its land, and therefore we have to negotiate with them because that's who we are. So if you got a complaint, go talk to the Supreme Court or talk to actually the English Crown that said that we were negotiators, not land stealers. And, you know, we were land stealers, but we had a different story. So they're a little, they still shouldn't have that right. And then I read, when the heck was it, yesterday, that what they've said is, if any Indigenous person is actually using one of those weapons to hunt and maintain a subsistence lifestyle, they can keep it until they can get a satisfactory replacement, and then they have to turn it in. Otherwise, everybody has to turn their stuff in. They have to be hunters, subsistence hunters. And there was one called a Springfield. It looked to me like you might have been able to use it as a hunting rifle. It had a big clip, but looked like a rifle. The rest of them all look like machine guns to me. But so I have to go back and tell my neighbors now what I found out, that they're okay. They actually won the argument. The Indians aren't going to keep their guns either. Maybe they'll feel better. I have no idea. But so here, we won. And it's about normalizing relationships and trying to understand that we won. That this isn't about us supporting them in some welfare state. This is about, we made agreements with them about their land when we took it from them, that we would keep paying for it. That's all it is. We're just paying rent, sort of, or royalties, or whatever you want to call it, on land we took. And that's all we're doing here. And we're not paying very much. And then somebody said, what was it in the conversation? They said, oh yeah. They said, well, you know, like, they don't treat their own people very good. You know how it is over there. You know, you take a look, see whose house is the best house on reserve. It's always the chief's house. It's always the council member's house. And there are all kinds of people without housing. And I said, well, they don't get enough money for everybody. And I said, I wonder who they learned that from. Like, when you look around, like, are there homeless people here? So you know, it's our system, and you want them to take on our system sometimes, but at other times, no, they shouldn't take on our system. They should do everything fairly and equitably. Well, maybe we should, you know, maybe it's possible that we could do this. So here some of us are in some part of those conversations. I think we're trying to learn our own history and who we are and who the Indigenous people are, and we don't really want to learn it at all. We just want to get on with our lives. They should get on with their lives. But we're trying to work it out. We're colonization 200 years in at this coast and 400 or 500 years in on the other coast. But we're working through it. But there, colonization is actively happening. The colonizers are in and they're taking the land right now. And so if you're in active dialogue with one of the colonizers right now, you're not seen as a person who who is a trustworthy part of your community, right? You're seen as a collaborator. You're a quisling. You're somebody who is participating in the destruction of your own people and the theft of your own land. So it's quite different, because I thought there's a bus that goes down that road like 4 times a day, and there are 2 people on the bus. It looks like a Greyhound, right? It's a big road bus. Goes to Jerusalem, and it takes settlers from their illegal houses, just a couple miles down this road, to their jobs in Jerusalem. And I guess there are not many of them working, because I never saw that many people on that bus. And there are people in this village who used to be farmers. 86% of them were farmers before, well, birds or, agricultural people. Because there's no actual, like farming as we recognize it doesn't happen there. It's all trees and vines and sheep, goats. But that's how they lived. They lived off the land after they got there, after the Nakba. And they moved in. I think there must have been a few houses there, because some of these people have deeds going back to the Ottoman era. So some people were there. The rest of the people came. Maybe they were relatives, I don't know. And they were farming. But then they put up the settlements, and the settlers attacked the farmers. They make it very difficult to farm. And the population's growing. So a number of people from this village work in neighboring villages, Tukul, which has 10,000 people. Some work there. Some have cars. They drive into Bethlehem. They go through the checkpoint, and they work in Jerusalem, or they work in Tel Aviv. But they don't have any transit. The kids that go to this school, these 2 portables, and then behind these portables, there's another small building with 4 rooms, and then there's an apartment house that they rent 6 classrooms out of next door. Those kids all walk, and it's fairly close. The girls that were walking were going to this is an elementary school. I think it's K to 5. All the other kids have to go to school in Tukul, and there's a Ministry of Education van that takes them in. But on this day, it was broken. The van was broken down. There's no backup. There's no money for backup. And so the girls are walking to school. And the men who don't have a vehicle, will walk to work, to Tukul. And so they're all walking. And the terrain is fairly rocky and pretty rough. So the roads are the places, where the paths were. So you have to walk fairly close to the road, and that's where they get hit. But those buses go to the settlements empty. And I said, what the hell? It's a no-brainer, right? Just get on the bus. And my Palestinian friends looked at me like, are you kidding me? There's no way we could get on that bus. That's an Israeli bus. We can't get on that bus. That would be, first of all, they wouldn't take us because we're Palestinians. But secondly, even if they did, we would be seen then to be cooperating in the occupation of our own land. We can't get on that bus. So there's that barrier between the 2 communities knowing each other. There's another community also close to Bethlehem where we went. Oh God, I can't remember the name of it right now, but there's huge settlement right beside it. It's massive. The whole settlement complex probably has 80,000 people in it, and it's made up of a bunch of different settlements. I call them colonies in my report. I'm trying to keep that term, colony. Over there, people say settlements and settlers, but it's a very benign term here. So I want to use colonies and colonizers, because over there, settlers that's not a benign term over there. Not in Palestine, maybe in Israel, but not in Palestine. So I try to remember colonies, colonizers. So there are many colonies beside this particular village. And when Israel built the wall, the separation wall, they planned to put it between the colonies and the village. And the people in the colonies said, no, don't do that. We go shop in that village all the time. And if you put the wall, it's going to make it too hard for us. Plus, a bunch of people from the village work in the colony. They do. Because they can't get jobs anywhere else. They can no longer farm because their colonies are right on the farmland that they used to own. So they said, no, don't put the wall up. And they fought it, and they got the wall moved some distance away. And they saw that, some people saw that as a victory for reconciliation work.
Yeah.
But some of the people we talked to in that village said, oh no, that's not what it's about at all. It's Israel's long-term plan, and that colony's long-term plan to eat this whole village up. They're going to consume us. We're the next target. And they didn't want the wall in because it would have made it difficult. This way, they could eat us more easily, and that's what's going to happen. And the Trump deal said that that village is going to disappear, that it would become part of Israel. So, but it was interesting. Israel's always confiscating, right? They come in, they take stuff. They took the equipment for the school building. In that other village, the one I'm talking about, they had come in about a year before, and they had confiscated all of the kerosene from the local general store. Took it all, like 45-gallon drums of it. They came in and they confiscated all of it. Anyway, they took it. And I said, so like, what? Why would they take kerosene? Like, what the heck is that about? I mean, it's a fuel, right? People use it as a fuel there. And he said, because the stores in the settlement were selling it at a price that was about 1.5 times what it was being sold for in the village. And they complained that all their customers were going to the village to buy their kerosene there. So they called the military and they confiscated the village's kerosene so the stores in the settlement could sell to their customers at their price. Holy shit. Some of the ins and outs of the occupation just amaze me. So Kisan is, as I said, a Bedouin village. There are many of them scattered throughout Israel and Palestine. They all came from the Negev at one point in time. And Bedouins think like Lawrence of Arabia. I mean, that's how they look. They were like camels and horses, and they moved their herds back and forth across the Negev. If they overgrazed, like we were talking about last week, they'd kill everything. So they just kept moving back and forth. There were thousands, tens of thousands of people in the Negev. But whenever the British were there, they couldn't see anybody. So they said it was empty. And so they talked to the UN. They said, oh yeah, you can give that to Israel. It's empty. There's nobody living there. Well, there were lots of people living there. So Israel determined that that was good land to expand into. It was legally part of Israel. The United Nations had given it to them. And so they immediately in the Nakba went into the Bedouin communities and moved them out. But Bedouin being Bedouin, a lot of them never moved, or they just, disappeared one day and popped up somewhere else the next day. There are still about 40,000, I think, Bedouin in the Negev. And I don't know, I think they're about, I forget what I read, 8% of the overall population of Palestine, maybe 3% of the population of Israel, in these pocketed communities that they were dispersed to, but also living in the Negev. And Kitzan is one of those pocketed communities. It probably originally maybe belonged to a relative or something like that, but these people all moved there from there. So none of their houses are legal. I didn't put that in the report either. I guess I should have. I looked at it later and thought I should have put that in. In one of the comments on Facebook, it was very interesting. I put it up on Facebook. Somebody posted a picture in the comment line saying, oh, is this the village? I was there last year. And she's got a better shot of the road going up to the mosque and the school than I have. And she said, we were told the mosque was under a demolition order. And I said, yeah, it is. And so are most of the houses, because the houses were built without the permission of the occupying authority, without Israel's permission. So as far as Israel is concerned, they aren't legal and they can be torn down. And so they put most of the houses in Kisan under a demolition order. Or if they were original houses and they've been expanded, Israel puts a demolition order on the expansion. So if you had one floor and now you have two, they will come in and demolish the second floor. Done that in a few places there. Kisan, we saw the ruins of, I think, 2 houses that had been torn down and demolished fairly recently, and just the other ones that are under demolition orders from the occupiers, from the Israeli military. So interesting, different different kind of way of reacting to the occupation in Pisa, and then you might find in a neighboring village that was a longer-term Palestinian village that had been settled in that area for centuries. The Bedouin have a different approach. Lawrence of Arabia, I don't know. They're more logistic. When they heard the trucks were coming in to take away those two pieces of equipment, the young boys in the village went out and got boulders and put them all the way across the road. We couldn't get out. They put all the boulders in the road. We had to get them to move them so we could leave before the Israeli military came with flat deck trucks to take the equipment away. Yes. You're done?
Thank you very much.
No trouble, eh? Yeah. And Meals on the Ground was warming up some food in our kitchen. They created an impasse on the roads, which are fairly narrow anyway in the villages, so that the Israelis would have a hard time. They would be exposed, moving those rocks, because they didn't have anything bladed with them to push them out of the way. And then if they're exposed, well, there are other rocks and people to throw them. So they're strategic. Other people tend to march up in big protests. I think the Bedouin think more about, okay, well, if we hide here, then we can have a better effect. So, yeah. What more can I tell you? I should tell you about so when we were in the principal's office, what did he tell us? Besides, the revelation that just became clear to me that, oh yeah, that's why the settlers are going so fast through everywhere, because people throw rocks at them. And then I thought, okay, but does that make it an accident, right? I mean, the settler is driving at a high rate of speed through a place that's poorly lit and windy road and road, but windy, no shoulders, hits somebody. Is that an accident? In Canada, that'd be an accident. But is that an accident there? I mean, if I decided I was going to get a cheap rent by being part of the occupation in somebody else's country, and I went and lived there, and because I lived there, I'm at risk. And because I'm at risk, I take actions to minimize the risk, and I hurt somebody else. Is that an accident? Or is that really just the logical consequence of a chain of actions that I took?
That you were allowed to take, sorry.
Mm-hmm. Nope, you were unmuted. Now you're muted.
Here we go.
I have to reverse it in my head. It doesn't make sense the way they do it. It's a chain of actions you were allowed to take because your government allowed you to do that, and to
encouraged you to.
Yeah. And so to me, and I was curious what you said about, different towns, and it could depend on how long they've been there. The reactions and the incidents look different. But I also wonder, like in so much of politics, you've got the regional politics and the more overarching politics, is how many regional politicians, take it upon themselves to create havoc or not, or
well, in some ways it's like a game of chess. You have the occupation, and you know what the occupation wants to do, right? They want to encroach Bethlehem entirely, and by doing that, building that kind of exterior fortification around Bethlehem on three sides, and allowing Jerusalem to move into and to overtake Bethlehem from the other side. Then what they've done is guaranteed Israel's access and control to the rest of Palestine beyond Bethlehem, in all of that sort of unpopulated tiny village area where all the resources are. So that's their chess. That's their long-term goal. It's slowly one community at a time, keep building that in. The Palestinians' counter moves are equally on the board. So a regional politician or human rights campaigners or PLO planners might think, okay, where's the village that's in the middle of all of this? which one do we need to put the most support into? Where are the ones that are completely blocking the objective? So there's a village called Khan al-Amar, also a Bedouin village, one that it's on the United Church of Canada website. We're supporting it. Khan al-Amar's people were dislocated, I think, in 1952 to where they are now. And their homes are rudimentary compared to the ones in Kisan. Kisan, their homes are concrete construction. Some of them are 2 stories. The people are poor, but their homes look relatively solid. And Khan al-Amar, they look like almost like those portable garages. They are, canvas over pipe and stuff. And they've been there since the 50s. They still have lots of herds, the land around them. They've been grazing, and there are other smaller Bedouin villages pocketed around them. Where they are is in a place where Israel could construct a superhighway, which it does. It will divide a chunk of the West Bank from another big chunk of the West Bank, pretty much cut it in 2. So the Palestinian Authority, human rights campaigners from the European Union, from the United Nations, are doing everything they can to keep that village there. The Israelis have put the whole village under a demolition order and said it has to be demolished. It has to make way for the superhighway. The Belgians built a school there. Or paid for it. It's a mud, it's what, straw and mud construction school. And there's 100 kids that go to that school from the surrounding villages. And the school, because the school is there and because you have all these little kids, the optics of the Israeli bulldozers pushing that school down with those kids have created a very difficult situation for the government of Israel, which has wanted to destroy that village for 4 years now. So there's a peace camp there. International volunteers sleep in that peace camp. They stay there. If there's ever, it sounds like they're going to fire up the bulldozers again, people move in. There are internationals there all the time, trying to keep that village going. So the chess game with Khan al-Amar is to hold that village as much as possible, keep it supported, put in schools, put in whatever resources you can, while the Israelis on their side are trying to get them out. So the Israelis built a sewer line right beside the village, Khan al-Amar, and right beside the school, they put one of the vents. So it's a great big sewer line. It's like, I don't know, 6-inch line. Oh no, bigger than that. Maybe a 12-inch line that runs, and then the vent cap blows off, and it spreads shit smell through the school. And they fenced it, so you couldn't get at it, except, hell, they're Bedouins. So they went over the fence and they plugged off the sewer line. But that's what, the Israelis do to try and make life as uncomfortable as possible without directly attacking. And so the Israelis have to maintain a legal fiction. So it's totally illegal for them to do what they're doing. But they issue a written demolition order because you never got permission to build this village in this place at any time. But because it's a written demolition order issued by an authority, then you can go to court. So the Norwegian Refugee Council pays for lawyers to take those cases to court and fight them, and they fight them for years. They go up to the Israeli Supreme Court, they always lose. But the Israelis, they like to tell people they're legal and you have your day in court, so they wait those years for the cases to play their way through the courts. And then when they've lost, they come and destroy whatever place it is, or maybe not. Maybe they wait for a while. In this case, Khan al-Amar, they're waiting. They're still waiting. We don't know why, but they still are. In Kisan, most of the houses are under a demolition order. They've demolished a couple, and they'll probably keep doing that. That's also part of the tactic of the occupation. Everybody's got an order. They've all lost their cases in court, if they ever filed one in the first place. Nobody knows when the bulldozers are coming. They could come tomorrow. Could be a couple of years. Could be 10 years. You just don't know. And one of the tactics of the occupation is to keep people unsettled, uncertain, never really secure, to always keep people churning and hoping that that constant disruption in their lives will get them to move and leave so that you can take over their stuff, their place, their lives. So Khan al-Amar, very strategic. Kisan's pretty strategic, but not as much. as Canal Lamar. So there are some local regional politicians who are trying to keep some services going there for those people, but in the regional chess game, it's not quite as important. The garbage dumps are Bethlehem garbage dumps. So Palestinians are, in this case, also part of the oppression. So, yeah. I was just remembering the principal telling us that, so how do you like being in the school? Because he comes from Bethlehem, from Beit Jala, which is basically part of Bethlehem. I said, so how is it being a principal here? He said, it's great. He said, it's way better than being a principal in one of those schools in Bethlehem. He said, because there's nothing here. They don't smoke, they don't drink, they can't get it, he said. So they come to school. He laughed. There's no corner store for them to go and hang out in. He said, it's a perfect place. He said, it's just a really tiny school. The new one will be much better. He's really proud of that new school, and that they secured the funding and permission from the Ministry of Education to build it. They had submitted what we call an OCP, an official community plan, to the government of Israel 25 years ago that had that school, that land zoned for school. And the advice of the EU lawyers was, as long as the Israelis hadn't challenged it, it was good to go. So they went in to build the school. Of course, the settlement down the road there, they fly drones over that village fairly regularly, so they can see what's going on. And they reported that this construction was happening in Area C, which is Israel's part of the territory. And then there was quite a bit of drone activity on the one day we had gone up to see. We were going to take a look at the site of the new school and see how things were. And the principal said, no, please don't go there. He said, there were a bunch of drones here. And we're worried that if we draw any more attention, and there had been a farmer in the field kind of this way, running a tractor to plow open the ground, and the military didn't want him plowing that ground, so they went to confiscate his tractor, steal his tractor. They chased him into the village, and they said the chase got pretty close to the new construction, and they were worried the military or the drones might draw the military back in again. So could we not visit? So we said, sure, we'll come up some other time. And then we got a call the next day that the military was there, that they confiscated the equipment, and they were hauling it away. So we went up and took those other pictures that I posted of the villagers. I had a great conversation with the contractor, the guy who was doing the building, with the engineer who'd done the design work, about, just what it's like, just the practicalities, right? You have like $100,000 piece of equipment confiscated, and they just take it, and you can't use that equipment on any of your other sites. You'll have to pay your crews because you have your guys working for you. All of the complexities that are just normal for a building contractor are multiplied by the occupation. The things that you have to think about, the things that happen when you're trying to do work in that particular. So it's stuff I never really thought about, but of course, those things would happen. So anyway, I've rambled on. As per normal. Any questions?
Oh, I guess I'm thinking like big picture with, what the end game is. And I know you showed us the video about people have different ideas of what two-state means and stuff like that. And before the Israelis came, I can't imagine it was all milk and honey and people all getting along. But how did they manage conflicts before it became a Israeli state?
Well, for the longest period of time, I think in more or less recent history, the Ottomans were in charge up until the early 1900s. Mm-hmm. So they would have gone to whoever the local governor was, right, and managed through their local authorities. There was and still is like a feud thing, right? So it's honor shame country, and I've talked about honor shame, right? That so you do something that upsets somebody from one family, their whole family has to push back, and so there were. I I remember hearing shots one night from someplace. I asked our driver about it the next day, and he said, "Oh, that was that village. Those two families in that village, they don't get on. They're always fighting each other all the time." I said, "They got guns?" "Well, yeah," he said, "they got guns." He said, "But they don't use them on the Israelis." He said, "No, they use them on each other. Nobody shoots the Israelis." Very interesting. People have guns. They use rocks on the Israelis, not guns. But yeah, so there's still some feud stuff that happens. The Palestinian Authority in Area A and B, no, in Area A? Yeah, in Area A, the Palestinian Authority has police. They manage the conflict in Area A. In Area B, the Palestinian Authority looks after the zoning and the bylaws and the building, but the Israelis look after conflict. Usually, any conflict or crime the Israelis come after is seen as an attempt to overthrow the occupation. That's what they go after. Or, I guess it was probably a combination between you might go to the local governor, or you just fought it out between the two families that were engaged. And in an honor chain culture, I think you're probably really careful, because you can have feuds, and I think there are feuds, like long-standing generational issues between families. You want to be careful about doing that where you live. It's impossible to live. Yeah, that's how they would have done it. Now, we were at a center, the United Church funds a place called They've got a website, WI:/IAM, or WI''AM, and they are doing a lot of work within Palestinian community around conflict resolution, around using some of their traditional practices, which would be more, when Palestinians are in conflict, because of the honor chain stuff, I think, they'll hardly ever talk about it directly. They'll go to a third person, and they'll say, so-and-so did such and such. I really don't understand why so-and-so did such and such. And the third person might then go to the other person and say, "Hey, you just talked to me about this, and where do you get at with that?" And so it becomes a community conflict resolution process where nobody has to lose face because nobody's talking directly to anybody. They're all talking to the third person. And WIAM's been using that sort of traditional practice quite a bit in trying to resolve some of the conflict that exists between individuals and communities in Palestine and Bethlehem. And they were also doing a lot of work on traditional roles for women in the communities there, because women traditionally are not, they don't have, they're under the rule of the male head of family in traditional Palestinian households. And WIAM is trying to help change that perspective.
Yeah.
And that's a long road, I think, but it's, they're working on it. We were at another place, a women's center, where if women are, abused women, and safe home, safe village, really built on an Italian model, where women and their children can come if they're too hard. But even that place is very interesting. For me, they talked a lot about doing preventative work, finding out about an issue that was arising in a particular family and going in, doing the mediation work, doing mediation work after the woman left to repair a relationship, that everybody's interested in trying to repair the relationship and resolve the underlying difficulties and put it back together again. Family is really, really important. Much more so. Like it's interwoven in the culture.
And would families be part of trying to repair those relationships within their family? Like, it's not like you're professional people kind of popping in and out.
Well, professional people might be there to help families in the conversation. Yeah, families are part of it. And I don't know, a ton beyond that. I just know we had a couple of conversations with people who are engaged with family repair stuff. The one place we also went to, a place called SOS children's villages. They were started at the end of the war, Second World War, as places where kids who didn't have families could be raised in a sort of a village environment. And Palestine is very much like it's a little village in Bethlehem. Every house has a house mother who's lived there for years, and a group of kids who are fostered sort of in relationship. And the aim is, because a lot of those kids are estranged from their families, have been abused in their family settings maybe, is to repair a relationship and return the kids to the families. But if they can't, the kids grow up in a household that looks a lot like an ordinary family structure within Palestine. They take on different roles, responsibilities, and eventually age out into another house that's separate in the community, where they can learn how to be functioning adults from that house in the community. It's quite an interesting system, but built on a family relationship model and style that works in Palestine. Yeah, I forgot about that place.
It is, it's hard to imagine what it's like there, even with their stories, because you don't even know the questions to ask sometimes about, so how do Israelis or Jewish people identify themselves if, like you're saying, it's a very secular society and there's people from all over? Is part of their identity coming from pushing back against Palestine? Is that part?
Oh, it could be. Yeah, we're not them, you mean, or that they're the enemy? And yeah,
because they're like this idea of a place that just gets made, like it comes out of nothing, really is not that historic. Historically, it usually is colonizer colony, and it's about this. So there's an artificiality to this, and to how people in Israel identify themselves if they're no longer having their religion as something.
But there's still a founding myth. Whether they identify themselves as religious or not, they will still uphold the founding myth. God gave this land to our people. This has always been our land. We were here 2,000 years ago. Some of us never left. We were just returning home. That's always been, and so they would identify that as a historic founding myth as opposed to a religious founding.
Really, including the God part.
Including the God part, yeah, actually, yes, absolutely. But not everything else. So all of the kosher laws or Leviticus or Numbers, all of the rules and regulations about how you live your life if you're a religious Jew, the ones that have evolved since then. Yeah, no, not everybody. A lot of people, kosher people, religious days, women mikvah, they have to wash.
Yeah.
Purify themselves before they can be back at male company. A lot of people do. Orthodox Jews, a lot of are either secular or Reform, which is liberal Jews as well. Yeah, so they'd still be religious, but liberal. But yeah, so they would say this is our land, and so Israel, I said, like the facts on the ground, the facts under the ground. If you get Haaretz, the Israeli newspaper, which uses video and stuff too, they're always reporting about another archaeological find that shows that Jewish tradition was in this area 4,000 years ago.
Yeah, but that, like, worldwide, we shift it all over. You don't get to claim something because of, but
they do. They're drilling underneath the temple. People are worried that that whole temple mound is going to collapse because they're excavating underneath it so they can prove it's theirs.
Okay. So this is a question that maybe everybody knows already, but so the colonists, are they specifically like devout Jewish people? Is that their
I was
pardon me?
Mystified, right? They are Zionist.
Which means, what does that mean?
Well, Zionist means fighting for a Jewish homeland in these days in Israel. A Zionist is somebody who fights for the establishment and the maintenance of a Jewish homeland in Israel. That's a Zionist.
So are they religious, or are they just...
Well, they weren't. The original Zionists were not religious Jews. They were secular. But they wanted a safe homeland for Jewish people because it was like 1860s. Theodor Herzl, I think his name, was the most famous, the one who really started conversations going with European powers. Came out of Switzerland. They were not religious, but they wanted a safe place. There were the pogroms, the anti-Semitism, all the shit that happens to Jewish people because Christians needed somebody to blame and somebody who would loan them money at interest for a while.
Yeah.
2,000 years of that, they wanted a safe place. And he was up for either Israel or Uganda or I think maybe Peru, I don't know. Any of those places that were available in the empires, some of them. They settled on Israel. And those Zionists were not religious. And the Christian Zionists who supported Israel, they were not pro-Jew, they were anti-Semites. But they...
Oh, okay, they wanted them out of there.
They wanted them out, yeah, that's right. The guy, Balfour, who made the declaration, the agreements to create a Jewish homeland in Palestine, was a huge anti-Semite, but he was also a British foreign secretary and prime minister. So, and so he saw it as a good political move, right? Outposts for the empire, that was a good political move, and also just a really nice move. You wouldn't have to worry about the Jews dirtying up the gentleman's club in London. So, well, also a good purity move, I suppose. So most Zionists were not religious Jews, but that's shit. Most religious Jews were not Zionists. The ultra-Orthodox Jews, until really recently, didn't support the establishment of the state in Israel because they said that can only happen when the Messiah comes. The Messiah has to be the one that does that. And the Messiah has not come. Therefore, there should be no state in Israel. Also, we are not a people who take from other people. We do not kill, we do not steal, we do not oppress. We treat the stranger kindly. We look after one another in love. We are a people who established in a basis of God's call to appreciate the basic right of human beings to exist. That's who we are. We're not those people. So the ultra-Orthodox were much more interested in studying Torah, studying God, praying. The ultra-Orthodox believe that the Haredi Jews, they spend 18 hours a day in prayer. The men, the women, what the men do. And they study and they pray. And they believe that in that study and that constant study and prayer, they are always intervening on behalf of all Jews everywhere with God. That's what they're doing. That they're making a place in God for their people. And that's their work. The Haredi Jew we talked to said, so what's happened now in Israel is because the state doesn't fund like they used to. They used to fund Haredi Jews. Now they don't. Their women have to work. They do, he said, and now it's gotten us a bunch of feminists, he said, because the women are the economic power in the family now, right? They're making the money. So it's very interesting dynamics that are, interplaying, interrelating there. But so not religious, but very much we need a safe place. And also, it was our place. We just left it for a little while. And so then the other part of the story that can then go with that is because we left it, these other people were brought in to work the land by the other empires. They aren't original occupants. They haven't been here for thousands of years. They just came in with the occupiers who displaced us. They're just migrant workers. They can leave. They're just Arabs. They don't belong here. That's the story they tell about Palestinians. And of course, the Palestinians will say, I don't know, check the DNA, like if you want to. Some of us, sure, we came in. Some of us are red-haired and blue-eyed. The Vikings or the Crusaders left left behind memories of their dalliances. But in our basic DNA, we probably belong more in this land than those Europeans who've come here claiming that they have some heritage that connects them to this. They may have a religious heritage, but they don't have a DNA that connects them like we do. That's what the Palestinians do.
Yeah.
I brought home an icon of Jesus. Oh, it's in my office from, where was I? God. Anyway, a church built around Jacob's Well, and that icon, Jesus is like totally Palestinian. It's great. I finally, Jesus would have looked. So
Yeah.
brought that one home.
It's a, yeah, we tend to make him in our image.
Yeah. Oh yeah, always. I mean, there's African Jesus and Chinese Jesus. I mean, Jesus is present for all of us and appears in the way that we can accept, of course.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
historical Jesus would have been Palestinian, absolutely.
And yeah, like I was gonna say, it's not like I'm sitting here thinking, how can I make this work when, you know, many other people have tried to make this work. But it was helpful to hear what you said about the Zionist and the ultra
Orthodox, yeah.
Because it is like, yeah, this is very complicated. It isn't the good guys versus the bad guys, or
no. Well, so now the Orthodox Jews, who are not ultra-Orthodox, are Orthodox, so they would be akin to our Christian fundamentalists, maybe.
Okay.
They are Zionists, absolutely.
Yeah.
And people who live in these settlements, a lot of them were recruited to be very strong Zionists. You'd have to be if you're going to live in this settlement, number one. Number two, I don't think they're religious, because I couldn't find anybody to ask, but I could not imagine being a religious Jew and using the Star of David in that way.
Yeah.
You would not vandalize a building with that symbol. It was, I mean, I just think of what the Nazis did with that. I can't imagine that you would do that. You would show your strength and superiority by taking a symbol that is that powerful and using it in that way. I just can't imagine a religious Jew doing that. But then I couldn't imagine religious Jews polluting the land that they live on, and they do that. I mean, their sewage outflow actually goes into fields above another village called Nahalin and pollutes the fields. And they're ultra-Orthodox Jews that live in that particular colony. So they don't, but somebody said that's because they pay no attention to the world outside of their boundaries. They don't actually know what's going on outside of them. The common reflection from Israelis and Palestinians alike. The Haredi, the ultra-Orthodox, are like, they may be totally focused on God, but not in God's world. In God.
Do you think if the Israelis do get a different leader, that, you know, kind of like with South Africa and with Russia and those things, where leadership kind of made a big difference in concert with, you know, global pressure as well?
They had one for a while. They assassinated him. I feel like the Americans. So
yeah,
I don't know.
It's not unusual. It's this story that plays over and over and over again. And yeah, there's nothing about human nature that makes me feel confident that this is going to end happily.
Yeah.
For anybody, not for the Israelis either. Even if they take over everything, the seeds that are sown are going to be. There's a quote. Can't remember it, but yeah.
Yeah, it'll come home. I can't imagine. It's just never going to get to a place where they're ever going to feel safe in that territory if they continue on this road.
Yeah.
They could have total ascendancy and push out and wipe out all the Palestinians, and it'll still never be safe.
Yeah.
Never.
Yeah. But you can distract yourself right now with the process without having a real good
end
plan in a way, because you.
Well, yeah, the end plan has been there since the beginning, since the beginning. I mean, even the Zionists, Herzl, when he wrote about, okay, we're going to go here, we got to get rid of the Arabs. There's no way that we'll be safe if we're living amongst the Arabs, so we have to get them out. And that's been the plan. But they haven't thought past that.
Yeah.
There's like, there's Jordan, Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, like, what are you going to do? And you like, they're family connected, right? Jordan, like half the people we met in Bethlehem had family in Jordan, either because they fled there in 1948 or because they'd always lived there. So the Israelis are saying, well, okay, we'll just go there, go live with your family, get out of here. But then to forget, okay, if all the people leave, you're still going to have a whole bunch of Jordanians and Egyptians and Syrians and Lebanese who are really angry with you and who see the land you're on as their land. You just stole it. It's still their land. They still carry the keys. I told you about that, right?
Carry the keys. I feel like I'm like
refugee camps. When they went into refugee camps, they locked their houses, and they had these big skeleton keys. We have the little ones. They had big ones, and they locked their houses because they thought they're only going to be gone for a couple of weeks, and they'd be back home again after all this nonsense was over. And they kept their keys. 70 years later, they still have their keys because that's still their village. And only now it's the grandchildren that have the keys, but it's still their village. And when they're in a Palestinian refugee camp, when you ask them where they're from, they'll tell you the name of the village. That's where they're from. It's not the refugee camp, because by virtue of the name, they're in refuge until they can return home.
And that's what home is, even if you were not born there.
And these guys, a lot of these folks, they know what family they come from and what part of the Negev they come from too. And for them as well, they're here. This is their land. This is what they're trying to do. But in the big picture, where they're from is Bedouin Negev community, one of the tribes that wanders there. So it doesn't disappear, that heritage, that memory.
No, and that's a bit where I was coming at how Israelis see themselves, if it's not religious. And even within them, it sounds like there is a lot of...
People we talked to, again, from that same village where they didn't want the wall to go through. She's an amazing woman. I'll write about her. Very strong woman. It's the only verbatim conversation I took down when I was there.
Oh, cool.
And so I just took the whole conversation. It goes on for pages, but I did it in verbatim because one of our goals, when you're filing your reports to your organization, to the EAPPI, to the World Council of Churches, there's a standard report format that you're filling out online. You're checking off all the boxes. And one of the boxes they always asked us to check off was, did you have a woman-to-woman conversation? Really hard in a patriarchal culture to actually have that. And so our driver took us to that village, to that house, and she's the head of her family. She's the oldest daughter. She never married. Her brother lives with her, but he's clearly not the head of the family. She is. Her mom lives with her. And we had this wonderful conversation with her. And so I took notes, as detailed as I could, and then I left. Because I was there with one colleague that day. The young woman from Germany was there, Charlotte. And Charlotte is, strong, 26 years old, passionate, strong feminist, very interested in what women's work was happening with and amongst women, where were women's organizations. And so driver and I and the brother left. We went out in the backyard. They smoked. I hung out, and they were in conversation, Charlotte and the woman that we met. And so I didn't have that part of the conversation. I got a few things from Charlotte, but it was woman-to-woman conversation.
Yeah,
they talked about things that were I wasn't going to be privy to, and that was okay. That was part of the role there. But she told us their house had been, okay, how does this go? So in the Second Intifada, in Bethlehem, there was a group of fighters who were holed up in the Church of the Nativity. And Israel was ready to blow up the Church of the Nativity, but that wasn't going over very well with the Europeans. So there was a negotiation process that happened so that the fighters that were there could take voluntary exile. They went to Spain. And one of them was her brother-in-law and her sister then. So they were in Spain. Her brother, who was a lawyer, was engaged in the rebellion, the Intifada. He was in prison. He's gotten 9 life sentences. When he was picked up and imprisoned, the Israeli military came to their house. Her dad was still alive. A pretty well-off family, you know, a fair bit of land in different areas. They came and blew up, told them they had half an hour to get out. And then packed the house with dynamite and blew it up. It just leveled it completely. And eventually, after many years working through another relative who had some connections somehow, they got permission to build another house. They built one. And that was the house that we saw her in. She told us a story about, you know, part of their land had been taken over as a settlement. They built a settlement wall in such a way that she had to go through a gate in the settlement to farm some of her old land, because the Israelis are big on legalities. They only took the land that they could steal legally, and if they couldn't, then they didn't, but they walled it off. So she's farming land inside the settlement and outside the settlement. And they would come like every year and cut down her olive trees or burn her fields or something. And she would be in conflict with them all the time. She just kept going back. They would throw rocks at her. They hit her mom with rocks one time. She would try and get the either the PLO or the Palestinian Authority would not do anything because there was a settlement and they couldn't have any authority there. And the Israeli police wouldn't do anything because they said it happened to Palestinians. To do with us. So she was in constant conflict, very strong woman. And we talked to her, like most people would say to us, I think partly, you know, what they thought we wanted to hear, like, you know, if we can have full equal rights, because there's nothing left of our land. Like if you look at that disappearing Palestine map, like there's nothing left of Palestine. So if we could be fully equal within the single state, have the same rights and accesses to resources that Israelis do, okay, we could live with that, most people would say. He said, no way in hell am I ever living peacefully with these people. They're bastards. And I'm not, that's not going to happen. She said, but you know what? If you stop funding them, the American government pays Israel $3.8 billion every year. That's the only way they can afford to live here. These settlements are cheap, low rate because these people have nothing in the land. They're just living on it. They're not in it. She said, I'm in it. My family's in it. We are part of this land, and we have been for centuries. These guys are just short-term renters. They got a good deal on rent. They're here. She said, if you take away the good deal on rent, they're gone. So all you need to do, you North Americans, Europeans that are funding Israel, is stop. You stop funding them, these people won't get a subsidy anymore. They're not invested in this land. They're not part of this land. Whatever they say, they're not. They'll go. I think she probably is right. Most of the people in those big settlements only live there because it's cheap. Israel makes it very affordable for people to live there. So in the big ones close to her, I think that's a true story. In the one by Kitzon, that's different. They're Zionist. They're picked to be people who put dogs on chickens, to be the people who will attack at school, to be the people who, you know, worry a bit maybe about running a kid down, but not that much. Those people, they live close to Kitzon. The big settlements, some people told us in the Haredi community in Jerusalem that they lived in the big settlements for a while because they couldn't afford to live in Jerusalem. So that's why they're there.
Huh. So,
cheap rent.
So with the schools, because that is a bit what the stories were about too this week, yeah, and there's a huge power in what you teach your children. But they also, I think, like you said, with the place where they want to put the highway through, a school is something that it's really hard to rationalize destroying, right? It's like, it's not a holy building, but it represents human hope, right? Like it's about like like it's apple pie or whatever. Like it is, it's something everybody pretty much sees the same way. Like it's, you need these. This is how human beings learn and survive, and so those that one on the superhighway that they're worried about taking down because of, you know, global condemnation. Is it just that this other one in this smaller community was smaller? Is that how they get away with it, or it's that area C?
There are 50 schools in the occupied territories under demolition orders right now. They're already been built. We were at one that had been demolished twice, closer to like more settlements and an outpost. And again, yeah, this is small, remote, isolated, and they haven't demolished the school. They vandalized it. But they won't let them build another one, a better one. They don't want people to be comfortable. They don't want signs of stability. They don't want to allow communities to establish themselves. The whole aim of the occupation is to get people to be uncomfortable, disrupt them, make it very difficult for people to live where they're living, so they'll leave. And this is just another aspect to build more despair, right? Wherever
so are schools specifically targeted because schools are kind of like a heart of a community?
I think in part that's true, yeah. Yeah. I mean, we know in our own communities, right, when our school district started to amalgamate, what happened to the small communities that lost their schools.
Yeah.
Like, that's very clear. Like, at least where I used to live in the Kootenays, it was really clear. The Kootenays, the schools, the neighborhoods lost their heart. The place where people gathered was gone.
Yeah.
They became blocks of commuters instead of communities. So yeah, I think that's like really true in social demography. You get rid of the schools and you get rid of a lot more than that. And you disrupt, like, children. Children are the center of the family, right? So they kidnap kids, right? 3 o'clock in the morning, they take children.
Yeah.
It just disrupts the whole social structure as well, because parents then are no longer able to provide for their children, no longer seen as places of safety for children. A place where you should be able to be safe. It's considered like sort of sacrosanct, at least in Western cultures, a school, and the military goes in. Right? And the ones they're not demolishing, they'll go in when they feel like it. They figure there's a kid in there, or if they just feel like they need to disrupt that particular community, go into the school, attack, grab a kid.
Now, is it in this latest article with the kind of mindfulness practices that teachers or counselors are coming in to teach the kids?
That was last week, I think. Was it last week or the week before? I forget. But yeah, the Norwegian Refugee Council is doing a lot of that training, and so is the Bethlehem. Bethlehem Theological College, I think they're called anyway. Yeah, they're doing that as well. Yeah, trying to teach the kids different ways to process the anxiety and the anger.
Yeah. It's a way of, in a way, it's a way of fighting back.
It's resistance. Right?
Yeah.
And so is like everything a Palestinian can do to live a normal life, a peaceful life, is resistance. It's active resistance, but it's Gandhian. It's Christ resistance. It's Gandhi's resistance. They can't resist with arms. They can't really resist with rocks. They have to resist in other ways.
Well, it was interesting. I hadn't realized that there was gun ownership in Palestine. I figured you throw rocks was because...
I know, me either. People have, they get guns. There's guns everywhere. Open carry everywhere. The settlers carry guns. Kisan, last week, there's a there's a checkpoint close to Kherson where they're checking people for COVID. And the Israeli settlers came with their guns, open carry guns, and were firing rounds off in the air to, I don't know, show the villagers that they could, I guess. If you've been in the Israeli military, then you have the right to carry your weapon wherever you go, whenever you go. And we saw a fair bit of that in Jerusalem, people in civilian clothes carrying machine guns, really. I mean, they call them assault rifles, but they look, I don't know, like machine guns to me. So they're around. And I think in any place where there's that many of them, you're always going to be able to get your hands on one. Shouldn't be a big deal. Not a problem. We'll leave money. People will sell whatever they get their hands on. So yeah, but not against the Israelis. I think I don't know, it'd be probably, I can imagine if, what happened to the partisans in France or Italy, in France or some of occupied Europe, if one or two of them went out and used weapons against the Germans, then the whole village paid.
Yeah.
They pay, but I think they've decided what's acceptable. So they pay with their children. They pay with their houses. They pay with their schools. But they won't pay with the wholesale execution. That's happened, right? Villages have been massacred. There's a history there all the way around of some people rising up against other people because of their ethnicity or their religion. It goes back hundreds of years. But more recently in the Intifada, well, not so much the Intifada, in the Nakba, one of the ways that the Nakba was so effective was because there was one particular village where all the occupants were massacred. And then the news went out into European news stories. The Red Cross verified that had happened. They'd seen the bodies. And then all they had to do was shoot one or two people in the next village over, and everybody left. They didn't have to fight.
Yeah, that's
and in
historical.
Lebanon, in the war in Lebanon, the Israeli military there's a faction in Lebanon that didn't like the Palestinians, the Christian militias or something like that. I forgot who they were. They went into a refugee camp and killed hundreds of people in a Palestinian refugee camp in Lebanon. So there's a memory, an active memory, living memory of what happens to people who oppose too much.
Yeah.
The Nakba people rose up with weapons, and I just read an article somewhere that the 10,000th Palestinian was just killed like last week, since 2000, right? Yeah, I think it was 2000. And in the same time, about 1,800 Israelis. Most of that happened in 2000 to 2002. Most of the Palestinians it's been scattered throughout, like the bombing campaigns in Gaza, a couple thousand people there.
Yeah.
So what happens to you. They're not fooling around. They'll kill you. And they do.
And do Palestinians become the boogeymen of the Israeli children? Like, are Israeli children taught to fear as well? So
yeah, absolutely. The schools, like I said, the schools have plaques in them about all the young men and women who were killed defending their country. They call it Independence Day, the day of their national day. It's Independence Day, the day they won their freedom from the Arabs. They have a national day of mourning the day before. And the sirens go across the country on both of those days. So the National Day of Mourning is for all the soldiers who lost their lives defending their freedom, and all the people who were killed by the terrorists. I just watched a movie last night. It was some action thing. I wanted to lose my mind on something. So I'm watching this action thing, and it's some CIA plot thing. But then the Israelis pop up in Spain as part of the movie, and the main Israeli character, who's this hard-nosed tough guy, who took the family of one of the key proponents hostage in order to force him to get back an Israeli secret. That anyway, it's like the Israelis are the heroes, and he said, the guy's piece of dialogue is, well, I thought maybe it was terrorists who took my family. And the Israeli Mossad agent, or whoever the hell he is, reaches into his pocket, pulls out a newspaper clipping and says, no, I know the terrorists. He said, my wife and my children met one of them in a restaurant in Jerusalem 16 years ago. And he shows them the newspaper clipping. And where the hell did that come from? Like, geez. So
Yeah.
I put a thumbs down on my Netflix review, and I'm going to write them and say, what the heck? Terrorist? Really?
Really?
My God. Okay, I get it. But, nobody should be blowing up anybody's family. And that happened in the end and that was horrible. But my God.
It's, there's no escape sometimes.
I know.
If there's a more, it'd be interesting if you can handle some more Netflix, is the Messiah, that TV series.
I read the reviews, they didn't sound good. But anyway,
I enjoyed it have you seen it, Larry? Is that?
No.
No, okay.
No.
It's, it makes you think. That's what I like sometimes. And it's not, I don't know. I actually would say it's maybe set up that way. It's oh boy. And what was particularly powerful for me was the Israeli man who is in the police, out of the military, and vicious, but his family's fallen apart. He's just angry all the time about not much he knows, and it's hard to explain in a way. It's definitely like a Hollywood kind of thing, but a premise around belief and our need for belief, and how much damage we do to ourselves when you damage other people. Like his relationship with his daughter and wife that has suffered because of how he sees terrorists as a it trickles into every facet of your belief, and how people see Christianity, how Christians believe in Christianity. There's not many. I think it's a fairly well-known show. There's not many shows that kind of confront you in a way about, what do you believe? Why do you believe this? What is Israel the good guy? Is Israel the bad guy? Is this is Messiah, who is looks Arabic, and he's not very clear about who he is. That whole, who do they say I am?
Yes,
Before. Anyhow, it was, I enjoyed it because it wasn't those one-dimensional characters.
Yeah.
It's, and I must admit I haven't looked at the reviews for it or anything.
I'll take a look. What I saw was an Arabic-looking guy, and there were different miracles that had happened, and the different agencies that kicked into gear around trying to figure out if he was real or if he was a fraud or if he had some other motivation to coalesce people around liberation or something like that. I forget what I think that's what I saw in the clips.
Yeah, and I think it was filmed in Jordan as well. So when you speak of Israel and I see the photos, I'm seeing Jordan from that movie as part of it. There's also the Midwest and the States and stuff like that. It's but the Israeli character is a big character, and he is not in a way
sympathetic.
Yeah, he does not come across. He comes across as a very tormented.
Okay, I'll have to have a look.
Person. It's a bit brutal. It's not a. The violence feels very real.
Yeah.
Not that Hollywood, people are dying all over the place, and you think, well, what happened to that poor bodyguard's whole family and stuff? How are they going to react to him being one of 20 people killed? But thank God the main character survived, right? Yeah. With what you've experienced there, it would be you might be able to bring more into it
No,
than just a
take a look at it.
Hollywood Netflix thing. And I don't think they renewed it for another series. I think it got, which I was disappointed by.
They're always doing that with the good ones. There was one from Australia or New Zealand called 800 Words that I was enjoying. It was kind of light, but I don't think it was on Netflix. It was on Acorn. You can get Acorn through the library.
I can get Canopy through the Canopy portal?
Through the ride. Anyway, if you go to the library website, it says what's available electronically. Acorn TV through another app.
Yeah, Canopy. Yeah.
It's Canopy. But anyway, you can get Acorn for a week, and then you can just renew and renew and renew. And on Acorn, they had this series from New Zealand called 800 Words, and it was kind of light. It was fairly light, but the premise was an Aussie columnist had moved to this tiny little village in New Zealand, and it's just all the interactions between the villagers, the columnists, the families. It was light, and yet took on some fairly deep topics in a way that was interesting. He had to write 800 words every week for this Aussie paper. So the story threads in and out of the column that he's writing, and how he's seeing people and what's happening to him in his life and his kids, and it was quite good. And they canceled it, the bars. Were like 3 seasons. That's it, okay. And they didn't wrap it up or anything. It had no big mash event. It was just like done.
Yeah, his eyes left a bit hanging, but I don't think that hurts it. And I was just, when you had said that it reminded me about I think it was the last article about, or maybe it was the one before, about the teachers really wanting more art, more theater, more. And to me, that, with everything else I've heard, I think that is the one hope that's still out there, because symbols and like movement, like the art has such healing in it. Like, we're not going to think our way out of this, I don't think.
Refugee camps, the one we went to, we were closest to, was just around the corner from us in Bethlehem. That camp had lots of programming for kids.
Fantastic.
And they had art, theater, video. We saw this. We just walked in one night, and there's this guy, and he said, "Oh yeah, I can show you." And so he's showing us. He's a musician, and so for a while there, he worked as a youth leader. And then he said, "I was taking too much of my music away, so I just volunteer. I don't work here anymore." But he showed us some of the things that they had done, and the kids had done a little movie. They had some guy, I think, looked to me like a European videographer had come over and trained them and just led workshops for them. And they had done little movies, and they had a film festival afterwards of the movies that they had done. And these kids, they wrote it. They wrote the story, they acted in it, they filmed it, they edited it, they did it all. And they were like 8 to 12-year-old kids. So they do this movie, and life in a refugee camp for a kid. So the premise is there's 4 kids playing soccer in the streets, which are narrow and overbuilt, and there's no place for kids to play. And so they're playing soccer, and they kick the ball, and it goes over the wall into somebody's yard. And this guy opens the door, and he says, "I told you kids to quit playing with this ball," and he throws it back at them. And he says, "Don't ever do that again, or I'm going to cut your ball." And so they play with it for a little bit longer, and the ball goes over the wall again, and he comes out, "I told you kids not to do that." He takes out a knife, and he stabs the ball, and the kids are just heartbroken. And so they plan revenge, and they come up with a plan. And the plan is, when that guy comes out of his place again, they're going to dump a big bucket of water over him. And so they plan very carefully, and they lead him into just the right place, and they dump the big bucket of water over him, and that's it. And he said, the guy who's showing us that some people were pretty upset about this because they didn't think it was a good way to do conflict resolution. He said, but I thought, well, it's like life in the camp, right? This is what the kids would do. Absolutely, that's what they would do. They thought it was a great story. But they had done all of that work to it. And so it was like, it processed the whole thing. What's it like to be a kid living in a refugee camp where there's no place to play, and where the neighbors are grumpy and grouchy and pissed because of their lives, and how do you work through this stuff? And what's the outcome probably wasn't that kids ever dumped a bucket of water over a guy, but if you're going to write an ending, how you were going to deal with that guy. If you're a 10-year-old kid, that'd be the way. You would process it in exactly that way. You know, in real life, they'd probably beat the crap out of you if you did it. But in the movie, you could do it, get away with it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's such a interesting playground to try things on.
Yeah.
Can we end on that happy note?
Yes, let's do that.